through the use of aromatic plants. And the way that we connect with our aromatic plants is actually very lucky. For you, those of you who are registering are coming to us from a number of Magical Pathways stores, Arts and Craft in Michigan, Pathways in Missouri, Soul Journey in New Jersey, Finding Avalon in Delaware, and New Moon Books in Florida. So I wanted to thank those shops and those for sponsoring this event. If you have not yet gotten a copy of any of the books that I have, absolutely contact your local shop. They love you, and we want them to still be here when we can go back outside again. So again, thank you so much for having me. If you are looking to expand your practice with your aromatic plants, talk with your local shop first. What I want to talk about today is turning your magical cabinet into an incense cabinet. And we'll do that a number of ways. I actually made some incense dough for us to play with. And I'm going to talk about a number of the plants and materials that we have available to us. So for thousands of years, people have been using burning materials as a way of connecting their life, their practice, and themselves to the above. God, goddess, him, her, it, them. They're using these smoking materials to lift up their prayers. And the ancient Egyptians burned incense 3 times a day, morning, noon, and night. They burned kefi, they burned frankincense, they burned these really incredible, complex materials for their different prayer times and for that connection that it brings us. So they were sending their prayers through the plant material and watching that smoke waft up to the ceiling, waft up to the heavens, waft up to that connection with the gods. So you can think about censers in Catholic Church, you can think about pagan rituals, you can think about ceremonies for religious faiths throughout time. And incense was a really, and is a very powerful way to make our intentions known. Because of the very specific language of the plants that we're using, you can very easily translate your need into an incense, into a plant material that you can burn yourself. So you can make it very easily using a blend of herbs, whether you add resins, sometimes flowers. Careful in the flowers, and I'll tell you why in a moment. But the perfect plants are just at your fingertips, and a lot of times even in your spice cabinet. The things that we don't have right at hand are just down the street at your local shop. So anyone can absolutely make incense. And there's a number of varieties in the type of incense that we can utilize. So you can find hand-rolled incense in your local shops. You can find sticks, you can find cones, as well as making your own smoke bundles. This is an incense stick I rolled last night just for this class. There's no bamboo stick in here. We're not sticking this into a traditional burner. We'll get to that in a moment. So you can utilize wood barks and flowers, any aromatic materials really, to create your own personal lifeline to the divine. So you can burn single ingredients as incense over charcoal. Just pop a bit onto your burning charcoal. That is a very general call to the universe, to spirit, to deity. This is what I need. So it's a bit like yelling, hey, I need money, or hey, I need love. Hey, I need protection. But by refining that and adding individual materials, you add more language for the universe, the gods, whoever, to understand the nature of this prayer specific to you. So a couple different plants that get burned. Asafoetida, it's not all that pleasant when you burn it. It's called devil's dung for a reason. Does not have a great smell, but it is one of the most potent and powerful magical plants for protection. So it banishes evil spirits. I wouldn't burn it in an enclosed room. I'd make sure I had a nice wide open space because that smell is quite strong. Cedar. Oh, cedar is lovely. You can burn the wood or the leaves itself as they're dried, and they're an incredible ally for purification. Cloves are one of my absolute favorite allies for smoke work. You can see, actually, I have a little package of ground cloves here. This bottle is probably older than my dog's because powdered clove is so easy to get a hold of, but I keep this one jar. It was given to me by a friend. Cloves bring luck into the home. They're purifying. And instead of leaving the space at a blank zero, cloves leave your space warm and whole and uplifted rather than just being back to zero. Remember, nature abhors a vacuum, so we want to make sure that if we're utilizing smoke practice, that we're not just clearing things out, we're making things positive so we don't leave room for negativity to come back in. Damiana. It's a very herbal smell. It's an aphrodisiac. When you add it to wine, lovers have been exchanging bottles of Damiana infused wine for hundreds of years. The bonus of this means it also has the ability to increase your psychic awareness, increase the awareness of outside the home. Dragon's blood is one of my dearest plant allies for protection. It looks like a red chalk. It's got a musky, almost a cherry smell to it. And I burn so much of it, I buy it by the pound. It's really gorgeous. Actually, I'll pick it up later if we need it. Frankincense is one of the most popular resins that's understood for plant ally magic. It banishes melancholy, it banishes negativity, but its association with ritual, with ceremony, and religious practice actually goes back further than the Catholic Church with whom it is associated. It's a really incredible resin. When you smell the oil, actually I have some right here. If you have it in oil form to diffuse, you'll notice it has almost a citrusy spike in the back of your nose that reminds you of sunshine, bottled, and it's a really incredible ally to work with. Ginseng. Ginseng banishes evil spirits. You can burn the actual leaves themselves. You can have fallen bark to work with. It's very easy to find. Hi John. If your shop carries materials that are associated with hoodoo, High John the Conqueror root is magical success. It destroys the blockages to your prosperity, to your magic, and to your success. I see dogs. So very easily distracted by dogs. Mistletoe, if you can get your hands on real mistletoe, it's fabulous for banishing evil. And as with all of these allies, just a littlest pinch will do you. Just grab the teeniest little bit, pop it on your incense burner, and you are ready to go. Myrrh, often used with frankincense. This is the purification aspect. So when it's utilized together in ritual, the uplifting comes from the frankincense and the banishing comes from the myrrh. So they complement each other very beautifully. Sage, whether it's white sage, whether it's great sage that you've grown in your garden. One of my favorites to grow is Salvia leucantha. It's a very long, very lamb's ear type leaf. It's very pointy. It looks like a very pointy arrow. It's incredibly soft, and it gets these long spikes of purple flowers. Sometimes the variety has purple and white, but they're beautiful. It still has that signature sage scent to it, but it really touches you in your heart. It's not as sharp as the Salvia apiana. It's not as sharp as the white sage, but it gives you that connection to your heart and your space. So I highly recommend growing Salvia leucantha if you can find it in your area. Sandalwood. sandalwood is fantastic. So you can find it on the shelf in 2 different ways. It'll be red or it'll be white. So the traditional sandalwood that's used in incense, the white is actually the exterior of the plant. So it's been bleached by the sun. The red is the heartwood. Remember, when they're processing sandalwood, you actually have to use the whole tree for something like essential oil base. So one of the things that we have done, because it's gotten harder to ethically source sandalwood, it's been a problem with poaching. People will sneak into a country, steal their sandalwood trees, take them into a country that doesn't have an embargo on the tree, and process it that way. So in order to make sure that we have an ethically sourced sandalwood, salvia, not salvia, the Santalbum spicatum is the Latin. It gets the spicatum because it's got almost a spicy note in the back of your nose that really brings a warmth to your sandalwood that otherwise the traditional is sort of lacking. It's really lovely. It's got a lower price point, and then you know it's ethically sourced. In Australia, it actually, for every tree they harvest, they have to plant 2. So they're really ethically sound. One of the largest sandalwood farms in Australia is 3 times the size of the country of France. They're just massive. So they're incredible, absolutely. Enough about sandalwood. It's used in protection and connection with deity. Tobacco is utilized for psychic awareness and connection with nature spirits. But you can add them together to get a more specific ritual need. So in the beginning of Sacred Smoke, I talk about creating your own authentic practice. And we start that by the first 2 plants that we work with are lavender and clove, because they're both very gentle, they're very easy to work with. And my favorite part is they're both used to make sure that your charcoal is burning properly. Charcoal is very finicky. If the package has been opened and left out to the elements, it can deactivate the saltpeter, so it can make it hard to light. So you can think, oh, I sat here for 10 minutes with it on a lighter. Obviously it's lit. If you sprinkle a little the powdered clove on there, you can see whether or not it's truly lit. If it's burning, you know it's lit. If it's not, I can smell it through the bottle. If it's not, then you know it was just trying to trick you guys to spend a little more time with the lighter. That's why I recommend a wind-proof lighter. It sounds like a jet engine when it's taking off, but that little extra oomph from the flame will make sure that your charcoal gets lit. So, reading from Sacred Smoke. So why incense? Why bathe in the smoke of these fragrant plants, resins, and flowers? Sacred smoke is a tool of magic and of transformation. Throughout time, people have embraced their sense of smell in new and exciting ways, using delicate flowers, plants, and resins to uplift them, to open their eyes to the world and the universe. The plants they grew were offered as dedication, a sacrifice to the gods to have their prayers heard. The ancient Egyptians burned 3 different incenses, morning, noon, and night. Frankincense at dawn, myrrh at high noon, and kefi at dusk. We can see this idea carrying over to more recent times in many indigenous cultures, even the Catholic Church, pagan religions, and New Age practices. And we've learned that the more about plants, their practical beliefs, that have also played a part. During World War II, nurses in makeshift hospitals burned bundles of lavender stems to get rid of bad air, as they knew lavender had antiseptic properties and hoped that dried plant could attain some of the same results. And to some extent, it did. So creating an authentic practice that is yours is really, really important in making sure that we're not we're running around any issues of appropriation, by finding something that's true for you, by starting with something like lavender and clove. You're writing down, you're noting how it makes you feel, how it sounds, any memories that it evokes. Because remember, when you smell something, you're not smelling the most recent time that you engaged with it. You're sort of experiencing the memories of every time you've experienced that smell at the same time. So if you smell something and it's just not right there, it's the edge of your brain and it's almost there, oh, it takes a minute because you have to travel through every memory that you have until you get to recognition. To recognize it, you have to remember what it is. So that's why scent is so very closely tied to our experience, our memories. So I was in Lush Fresh Handmade Cosmetics. I worked there for a number of years, and a new product came in, and it was sort of waxy looking and an odd color, and you smell it, and you're like, okay, I know this. I know the smell. And we argued about it for 10 minutes until all of our collective memories sort of caught up with the train. It smelled like circus peanuts. Those orangey cream marshmallow thing, it smelled like circus peanuts. But it's been 1,000 years since any of us had actually eaten circus peanuts. So it takes a minute for you to catch up with your memory. It's fine. So write down the memories that come up when you smell. Oh, I just got a vision of my mom making applesauce cake at Christmas when I was 7 years old. Those things are going to happen. You're creating a practice that is not just you and where you are today, but it's the building blocks of who you will become because you're incorporating the you that has existed throughout your lifetime. Every day you've had a different experience, a different visual memory that encompasses your whole body. So those are the kind of experiences you need to write down in your journal when you're experimenting with a plant. There are going to be plants that you hate, and that's okay. They don't take it personally. There are things that are available for other people. That's fine. Patchouli is one of those plants. You either love it or hate it. I love it. When I was writing Botanical Magic, I'm a double Virgo, so anytime I do anything, there's probably 6 lists involved. So I'm making a list of all the essential oils that I have on hand, so I know what I need to buy. So I have my complete set, and I'm pretty sure I had 6 bottles of patchouli when I did this inventory. This very grounding, oh wow, it smelled through the bag, earthy smell has a very popular history in American culture. So the people that don't like it usually associate it with hippies. I think that's one of the reasons I love it. My mom's best friend growing up is they're deadheads, and they traveled around, and you know, I'm pretty sure they own more t-shirts than Jerry Garcia did. It's actually a day of mourning in their home. We don't speak about it. So those experiences shape us and who we are. So people, even twins who lived in the same home, who experienced the same thing, will have different sense memories about the same thing. They may have gone to the same circus and eaten the same circus peanuts, but the smell might have made them think of a completely different experience. So even our sense memories are going to be different than even our closest loved ones. So incense isn't required for a good ritual, but a good ritual engages as many senses as you can. So incense is one of those things that helps create good atmosphere. It's not the be-all, end-all, but it can be. So full moon rituals, the types of plants and resins that are used associated with the properties of the moon itself are going to be different than something that's going to be associated with the new moon. So you could create an incense for each ritual that you do, for each observance that you have, whether it's celebrating the birth of your spouse or celebrating because it's Tuesday and you get to go outside. Every aspect of our daily life can be enhanced with scent. When it comes to these correspondences, make sure that you understand what your end goal is, because it can be very easy to say, oh, you know, I really like patchouli, so I'm going to put that in here. I'm going to put some of this. I'm going to put some of that. If that makes your heart sing, go for it. But if you're wanting something with a very specific purpose in mind, Make sure you've got that cemented in your head before you start blending things, because it can be very easy to wander off into the weeds just because something smells really good. And the important part of that is making sure that it smells good for you. This is your ritual, this is your experience, and that will be colored by your memories. That'll be colored by past experiences. So if you have something that just gives you bad memories and it's very painful for you, don't force yourself to use it in ritual just because you feel like you should. There's a time and a place to experience those things. Don't feel like you have to force it, okay? There are ways to train yourself out of a negative reaction to a certain smell. I can absolutely work with you if that's something that is helpful for you. But one of the most helpful things that I have found, both in my practice and in my work as a high priestess, is that the best thing about memory is that you are not remembering the initial awful thing. You're remembering the last time you remembered it. So just like old-fashioned mimeographs before you had Xerox, those memories start to blur over time. And you are no longer controlled by those memories. So moving on. So figure out what it is that you're hoping your aromatic practice will enhance. If you are looking to expand your psychic ability, know that that's the specific thing you're going for. And then take it a step further. I want to be better with my tarot cards. I want to be better with my pendulums. Because each intuitive tool has their own certain flavor. So working with tarot, you might want to increase your memory capacity. There's 78 cards, plus reversals. And then how each card interacts with each other. It's a lot of things to remember. But the experience of a pendulum is very much connected with who you are and where you are right this minute. So you might want to connect to yourself. So each of those flavors can add a little bit more into your aromatic practice. So if you were looking to connect with the moon, you might start with a myrrh base. It's nice and earthy. It's a nice base note. It's associated with feminine powers, but it's also in many metaphysical belief systems, the moon is referred to as a woman. In Irish and Anglo-Saxon, the moon is actually male. So depending on your culture and your cultural specific experiences will color how you view scent, okay? If you're from a tradition that views the sun as male or the sun as female, you'll bring those experiences along with your past experience. Okay. So, incense is representative of the element of air. So you can utilize it to represent air on your altar and in your practice, or you can blend incense to mimic the element that you want to create, to visit, to associate with. If I want to understand fire a little better, I might cast a circle where only fire is invited, so I can understand a childhood fear of my house burning down. So a fiery incense might be cinnamon and cardamom and clove and those warming plant materials. If you were going to use those, especially all together, I might make sure I have a well-ventilated space, especially if you have asthma, it can irritate the lining of the lungs. But as you create this idea in your head, absolutely think about not just the associations that are written down in a book. Try and take into account any memories that you might have. It might not be something that pops up right away, and that's okay. But give yourself an out if it's something that could be potentially upsetting. Once we have a really specific idea of what we want to do, you can go through all sorts of books, like Botanical Magic, and make lists of the things that are associated with your intent. I'll tell you a secret, since we're all friends here. In the very back of Botanical Magic, there is an index. There's a few indexes, but this one, there we go. This recipe index in the very back of the book. When you look, it says, oh, these are all the oils that are banishing. These are all the blessings oils. These are the oils for emotional well-being. That probably is the longest list. But when you're looking at this list, it's a ready-made list of associations and substitutions. If you ran out of cinnamon, oh wait, I can utilize, oh look, there's a whole list. I could use cardamom or patchouli or basil or grapefruit right there in the book. That's why we didn't use page numbers. I wanted to make sure that every space that we had a little bit extra for it. So what you can do is, if you're making yourself an incense, you can flip to protection oils, and each plant listed has associations with protection magic. So you can make yourself an incense based on protection just by looking in the back of the book. So I made some incense dough, I promised. As you blend up your incense, whether it's a loose incense that's intended to be burned over charcoal, or you're making some hand-rolled incense yourself, keep in mind the focus that you had for your material by picturing your outcome while you're rolling your incense, while you're grinding it with a mortar and pestle. Even if you're using I will absolutely admit that I cheat when I use really hard resins. I use a coffee grinder that's just used for incense. It's great to have on hand, and have the finest material that you can, because it'll blend a lot better, especially if you have something that's hard like a resin and something that's very soft, like I have an incense that is frankincense and mugwort. It's for setting boundaries. But if you try and have frankincense tears and this fluffy mugwort business, what you wind up with is a tin with some frankincense on the bottom, and the rest is all fluffy mugwort on top. So try and utilize something to blend those two materials together, and the coffee grinder is the easiest way that I can do that. So it's blessed for all those materials, but it gives you a little bit extra. So one of the ingredients, one of the intuitive recipes that I have is, for those of you who are taking notes, this is 2 parts juniper berries. Thank you, Sam. 2 parts myrrh. 1 part rose petals. And again, for roses and a couple other floral materials, especially jasmine, less is more. Rose does not smell like a rose bouquet in your garden when it's burning, especially jasmine. I'll put just a pinch of it in there. With all the faith and decorum in the world, jasmine smells like cat pee when you burn it. Just try not to. 1 part sandalwood. 1 part mugwort for that little bit of astral travel and intuitive ability. 1 part moonflower. And just a part of marigold flower. So add your ingredients to your mixing bowl one at a time. But mix in between each ingredient. It makes it a lot easier to try and incorporate, especially if you're making a bigger batch. Sometimes I'll make a bigger batch and then give a little bit of each to each person who's attended the ritual. You may decide to charge your incense through song, through chant, through dance, or even the ritual itself. the example given, full moon, shining bright, intuition guiding me this night. I bless these herbs to light my way. On a magical path, I will stay. Powerful moon up above me, as I will, so shall it be. I went a little faster. If you are wanting the wording for that, I can email it to you. You can hit me up on Amy Blackthorn author on Facebook. There's the page for blackthornhoodooblends.com. There's a million ways to get a hold of me. So this dough that I've made is a recipe that I made last night while I was working. It is probably 3 parts dragon's blood. It has 2 parts cardamom, so it's fiery. This is a protection incense. I put some cedar in there for the purification aspect. But what you do is you take this beautiful mess of ground resins and plant materials, sometimes flowers, and you add almost an equivalent amount of something called mako powder. Mako. So if you're making, you have 35 grams of plant material, I might add 30 grams of the mako and then blend it together. Just stir it up with a popsicle stick. Once it's really well and truly blended, you make sure you have a little bit more of the incense material than you have the mako powder. And then you weigh the whole bundle of it, the whole kit and caboodle, and add that much water by weight. So this little bundle actually weighed 120 grams, so I added 120 grams of water. And I stirred it, and stirred it, and stirred it, and stirred it, and stirred it, until you think your arm's gonna fall off. And then when it's sort of kind of lumpy, I was wearing gloves at the time. You start to get your hands in there, get really dirty and messy and gorgeous. And it took probably a half an hour from start to get to this point. I let this sit from last night to today, so it gets a little bit more mature, it gets a little bit more scent development. And then just peel off a chunk. Actually, it's like a really thick Play-Doh. When it's more wet, it is very, very, very sticky. Do not mistake how sticky that is. I roll it out on my surface. This will wind up looking more like a masonry nail than the cones you think of in your head when you look in your local shops. Because the thinner it is, the easier it is to work with, the easier it is to burn. So it's rolled out. This is too thick, but you get the idea. And then I'll actually sit it on my materials to dry for about 24 hours. The piece that I dried from last night, it's very thin and it looks just like the sticks that you buy in our neighborhood shops. But it'll dry something this thin, will dry in a little less than 24 hours. You could probably make the dough a little thinner, a little more wet, and make the material even thinner than this, and it will dry very quickly. So after it's dry, you'll know because when you pick it up, it'll have a drier look to it, and wherever it was laying on the material, if it was laying on its side, you'll see a very dark little stripe through it where it wasn't getting air on that one spot. Just roll it or change its position. You can actually, if you're making cones, you can just knock the cones over. This base is allowed to dry, and your hands will smell amazing for days. But in mixing up your incense and mixing up your magic, that gives you just another variety to make sure that it's message received. So where can you practice magic with your smoke materials? Anywhere. I mean, within reason, anywhere. I wouldn't say try and take it to your local restaurant when you're picking up your food order. But it's not space dependent. It's just making sure that it's not a fire hazard for you. You can see my little altar over the other side of the bookcase here because I don't have cats. It's been 28 years. The number of people who I know who have had horrible accidents with long-haired cats knocking over candles and covering themselves with wax is not small. So make sure that you're as safe as you can be for your space. Inside, outside, on your altar, in your bedroom, in your office. I actually have a really fabulous space for incense preparation here in the office because it makes it easier for me to think. You get anxious, you get stuff working on. It makes it a lot easier for you to feel what you're feeling when you have a little bit of incense going. Other fragrant items, just like oils and perfumes and smoke bundles, those are all, I actually have one burning on my altar right now because it's helpful and clearing and calming and very nurturing to have that smell access. How many of you who are on camera have seen videos of some fabulously dressed woman who's cramming some stuff together and she wraps it in twine and says, look, it's a smoke bundle, or look, it's a smudge wand, look, it's a this, or, and it looks, it's so exciting. And you're like, oh, I could do this myself. Yeah. There was a video 2 or 3 years ago of that went viral, woman making a bundle and she took a whole rose and a handful of lavender and some cedar sticks, and she just smooshed it all together and she wrapped it real tight and look, it's a thing. That is really fabulous. I'm very proud of her for putting herself out there. There's a few problems with this. So I see making a face. A whole rose in the center of a stick is going to mold horribly, especially if you live in a climate where it's very humid. It will mold in probably 2 days. I'm not interested in burning anything that's moldy in my house. The second thing is those very beautiful lavender stems that she put in the center of this bundle. Lavender, because those flowers are more like seeds than they are floral, they don't burn so much as they explode. When you can strip them off of the bundle, you can put them in your charcoal and you'll hear little pops. Make sure it's a fireproof area because they will actually pop themselves out of your incense sensors. So placing them in a wand to cleanse your house with means you've just made an organic sparkler that possibly set fire to your rug. Don't do it. What you can do is strip those beautiful flowers off, put those in, you can grind them and put them into an incense that we just talked about making, or you can burn them by themselves. It's really beautiful and as a scent to burn them over charcoal. Really lovely. But keep those stems. You can actually make smoke wands out of those. The stems themselves have the same beautiful fragrance. They still have the same warm, cool camphoraceousness that you associate with lavender. Still has the same properties, still has the same everything. So give yourself the ability to try something new. So your sense of smell is a particular sense that connects you both to your past and to those around you. Our sense of smell connects us to our oldest understanding of the world around us, and it is the most important one we have. We use that sense of smell as infants to connect to our mothers before we could even see, to tie emotions to places and more. Home has a scent. Mother has a scent. Fathers have a scent. Partners have a fragrance all of their own. Every day, our fragrant connections further those bonds. Uses in their daily life, we strengthen our relationships with those scent concerning each person. If you have a partner, if you have someone special in your life, you know their smell, even if it's not a conscious thought. Recently, my friend Sue was cleaning out her supplies and asked if I could use a box of essential oils. No, I was working on Blackthorn's Botanical Magic at the time. I readily agreed. Once I arrived home, I grabbed the first bottle in the box without looking at the label and pulled off the lid. Unbidden, from the corners of my mouth turned up into a giant grin, my eyes twinkled with past memories. This particular container I had chosen was bottled summer walks to the library with my mom and my 3 sisters for movies or books, and on the way home, if we were good, we'd stop at the neighborhood for a neighborhood treat, a snowball. In a small outbuilding on the side of the street, crushed ice was served, covered in flavored syrups, and occasionally marshmallow fluff. That barn painted sported 57 flavors, but for me and my mom, there was only one choice: egg custard. This bottle of benzoin oil I had smelled just like that egg custard. It was no mere essential oil, it was a time machine. Such is the power of smell. So by using a particular incense, you're building your own associations. When I was writing Botanical Magic, I had this really incredible experience where I was visiting a family funeral. It was a relative I hadn't met, great aunt somebody. So we had to go to the neighborhood Catholic church where my mom grew up, see all the family. I didn't know the deceased, so you sort of respectfully waiting. But I'm really anxious because it's the first time that I was seeing a part of the family who was very strict religious upbringing, and we had had a similar altercation at a previous family funeral, because this is the only time we see this side of the family. I'll get to this question in just a moment. I was anxious and I'm worked up and I'm sort of nervous about this side of the family and seeing them, and what if they say something? What if I don't say something? So I'm anxious, I'm nervous, I'm upset, I'm worked up. So what happens is I sort of take a deep breath and try and center myself. My mom's not here, I'm waiting. The service is about to start. And the back door's open. And the priest and the altar boys and everyone starts the procession into the room, and they've got the incense censer and things are about to begin. And I'm sort of got my shoulders up around my ears and I'm nervous. All of a sudden I'm okay. 1,000% okay. I'm no longer anxious, no longer nervous or upset, imagining worst case scenarios. Because, and it took me a second to figure it out, the altar boy had walked past with the censer. Inside that censer is frankincense and myrrh. It was a Catholic church. But I had never attended Catholic church as a young person. I wasn't raised Catholic. But my very first high priestess used to completely smoke out our ritual room because she was, as she used to call herself, she was a recovering Catholic. So the beginning of every single ritual we did, we had frankincense and myrrh permeating the room. So I immediately grounded and centered without even thinking about it. I had no conscious thought. I didn't even know what was happening. All of a sudden, I just knew I was okay. So these connections that you have may not have a cognizant thought behind them. You may have to actually tease out what's happening. But nevertheless, they're having that reaction with your person, whether or not you know what's happening. So those associations that we have with the scent that we experience can be magic in and of themselves. We experience scent on a vibrational level. Every living thing, every living person, being, plant, has energy. We talk about that in magic. Plants are no different. When you blend them into incense, when you have your patchouli or you have your cinnamon from the spice cabinet, when you blend them into incense, you're allowing the vibration of that plant and that life to sort of become part of you, even if it's just for a little bit. The effect that scent has on you will stay with you longer than even the scent itself. So that's why magic and incense is so popular. It's in addition to making your ritual space habitable, it leaves you vulnerable magically. So we're adding that second level of protection, both for our heart as well as our spirit. So how do we do it? Burning loose incense is really gratifying because you can blend it something that you need right on the spot. It's readily available, it's right there, and it may only exist as a liminal space because you may not have written it down, you may not think about it, you just grab some things that feel right and burn them. But they exist as their own liminal space because it's impossible to get it exactly right every time unless you're measuring. So charcoal discs are sold in all of our magical supply places. We are very, very thankful to have them. Make sure, as I mentioned earlier, having a windproof lighter, because the traditional single flame, you'd have to stand there for 10 minutes waiting for these to burn sometimes. So the windproof lighter has a little bit of air and oxygen behind it. It may make it a little bit more readily accessible for you to get it burning. You'll know it's lit because it'll start to spark, and that spark will travel the entire surface of the disc, unless it's been left open, in which case that windproof light will be especially helpful. If you're doing ritual with friends, if you have friends coming over, try and keep the blends that you create as neutral or uncomplicated as you can, because you're never really sure who has allergies to what. I've had allergic asthma forever, so you never really know who is allergic to what. So try and keep out things that are already going to be irritating to the lungs, things like cinnamon especially. So little bits, or omit it entirely if you're not sure who has allergies to what. Some people find they have less reaction if they use incense made only from natural materials. Get the best quality you can afford. That's all anyone can really ask of you. If you know someone has an allergic condition, if they have asthma, one of the things that people haven't considered, and I actually got this tip from a friend, is take a piece or two of resin that you're going to burn and place it in a water diffuser, and then the type that you put a candle under it and you light it and it wafts into the air. Instead of putting fragrance oil in it, put a drop of frankincense tears or a piece of dragon's blood in there, and as the water heats, it'll let the volatile oil out. Okay.
Hey, Amy, it looks like we have a couple questions if we're at a good spot.
Yes, we are at a good spot.
Let's see. So Sarah asked, is there an herb or flower you like in South Florida? And what are its magical associations? We've got several people joining us from Florida. So
yay, Florida!
I know the Floridians are probably looking for something that maybe they've got local to their area.
My favorite experience in Florida so far has been going to a regional festival in Florida. It was held on a campground, and we got to go out, we got to be in nature. And my favorite thing was seeing the live oaks with the Spanish moss as well as oak moss growing everywhere. And it's funny because the growing season is so long in Florida, it doesn't really get a hold of a lot of lull. It just keeps going. So the oak moss on the trees, not the stringy Spanish moss, but the flat, sort of wrinkly green oak moss that grows on the sides of the trees, it grows so much and so prolifically that it can't attach itself to the tree anymore. It just falls off, and so you see big hunks of oak moss laying on the ground. Oak moss is an incredibly magical plant. I actually have the absolute in my oil collection because it smells like leather and violets. It's incredible. It's really useful for magical materials. You can find probably 10 pages on it in Blackthorn's Botanical Magic. But my favorite things about it are it's hex breaking or hex picking. So if you think that you've been hexed, if you want to nullify any effects on your person, you can actually make a poppet of yourself and stuff it with oak moss. The oak moss itself has the magic of increasing a lasting effect. So it's for a long-term working. And like, be nice to yourself. Give your poppet a little massage. Put it out in some sun. Give it a little tan. Bless it with health. And by stuffing your poppet with the the oak moss itself, not the Spanish moss, but the oak moss, it has a really incredible vibrational energy to it. It just feels that you've been to the spa, that you've really taken care of yourself. It's one of my absolute favorite things. And even though I can see it on the trees here in Delaware, it's not something that's big enough to ever harvest. But walking around in Florida, I was like, oh, hey, look, I'm going to take a bag home of this oak moss. If it's something that you plan to work with, I would gather it in a bag, throw it in the freezer for 2 weeks to make sure there's nothing living in it before you start working with it. And then you can obviously work with it from there. You can you can keep it in a bowl next to your candle to increase its magical intent. You can take a small pinch of oak moss and put it in the bottom of a tea light cup, and then put the tea light back in there, so you're not having a fire hazard, but you're still able to work with it magically. And there's 1,001 uses for it. Good question, Sam.
Cool. Let's see. So I missed the first question, which was from Fran. What herb is best to contact the spirits of loved ones?
Ooh, mugwort is one of my favorite things in the history of plants. Also, I would say lemon balm or Melissa. It's associated with the goddess Diana. It's associated with the moon. And so the moon has those emotional and energetic associations with nourishing emotion. So absolutely, mugwort has the connection, and mugwort has the emotional piece. So you could actually blend the two of them. I would utilize mugwort tea and lemon balm tea as connections for the other world. You can also burn mugwort if you have available to you. If you're not having it in your local shop, if you don't see it, there's also non-smokable cigars that are sold for. It's called moxibustion in traditional Chinese medicine. It's a long stick about 1 foot long and maybe a diameter of 1/4. It's not a smokable cigar. Trust me, people have suggested smoking mugwort, but mugwort contains one of the most bitter compounds on the planet, so it doesn't have a great flavor. But you can waft it and use it as a smoke wand itself. So.
Looks like somebody's trying to maybe get back at somebody. Is there an herb to torture former loved ones?
Ooh.
Or former lovers. I was thinking loved ones from the previous question. Oh my god. I was like, your loved ones. That's rude.
Hey, not everybody had my family, so. Let's see. If you grow roses, you can actually, rose thorns are very easily removed. Just bend one to the side, bend one to the other side. You have a very handy thorn. It leaves a little bit of an open wound, so just give it a little extra love for a few days. But you could use rose thorns. You could use raspberry leaves. Think of it this way: if a plant can protect itself, it can protect you. And sometimes that protection is a little bit more aggressive than others. So you can remind them to keep their distance. You can burn plant materials to protect your home from their influence. And if you have more specific questions, feel free to hit me up. We'll talk. What's the next question?
Good stuff. So another question. Which sage plant did you suggest growing? I think you touched on it earlier. Somebody was asking, was it salvia?
Yep, Salvia leucantha. Leukantha. Like, think of a wolf, lupus, leucantha. Salvia leucantha is that long lamb's ear, soft sage, and it works beautifully for making bundles, burning by itself. And it's easy to grow it. It's a very showy annual. In Delaware, it's an annual. In warmer climates like Florida, it's definitely prolific. It'll definitely be a perennial out there. Easy to grow. It's very showy, very pretty. And it grows very, very easily from cuttings because it's so hairy. Each one of those hairs is like a root waiting to happen. Just cut a piece, stick it in the dirt, It's a new plant.
Great. And then it looks like somebody was just wondering if you could go over the properties of ginseng again.
Absolutely. It banishes evil spirits, and the very first thing. So you can burn the leaf that's dried. Don't try and burn it when it's green. It makes a weird smell. You can have a little bit of bark. You can burn that, and it makes a really good base for an incense for protecting their home as well, because you want to make sure it's the banishing properties, make sure that it extends outside the limits of your home, sort of keeping, we're keeping the light on for you.
Cool. And let's see. Oh, somebody wanted to know what you would burn to Red Tara, the Buddhist mother goddess.
Ooh. 9 times out of 10, I'll reach for sandalwood. Sandalwood is really connected with the deities of this area. It's a very common offering, and it's very easy to get your hands on some. I might, if I was feeling fancy, I might add something called aloe wood, or it's also called oud. It is also another sacred wood, and it has a darker, it's almost resiny. It's not as dark as like a Palo Santo, but it's another step down in that dark, warm, sweet smell family.
Cool. Let's see. Lynn asked, and I'm just using her name because I'm a little confused what the question is. Harvesting tansy leaves used?
You can utilize the leaves of tansy. If I was going to burn them in an incense, I would use the flower because it has a little bit more volatile oil in it. It's not the best smell, but it has really great associations for your magical use. Just remember that I wouldn't have any small people in the room when you're burning tansy. Tansy is one of those weird things where it's, depending on who you ask, it could be poisonous, but it's not poisonous, but it almost is. For instance, when it pops up in farmers' fields because birds have eaten the seeds. If the cow ate the tansy, the milk would then be poisoned. So you can burn it in an incense. Just make sure there's no one small running around because they have more delicate systems.
Perfect. Yeah. So let's see. Oh yeah, I actually wanted you to recap this too. What was the name of the sticky dough that you used for incense?
Let me grab the powder so you can see. This is Mako powder, Makko. And you can get a few ounces from just about anywhere online that sells incense materials. It's super finely ground sawdust. So this, when it gets wet, becomes very, very, very sticky, which is why I'm not putting any water on it right now. Sort of like gremlins. Don't get them wet. So what you do is, remember, add your bulk of your incense materials, add the Mako powder to it. Try and start with a 1-to-1 and then add a little bit more of your incense materials. Just because this has its own scent too. It's sort of piney and warm and sweet, but you want it to smell like your incense materials, not like this powder. So I might add a little bit more dragon's blood or a little bit more cedar, some of the base notes that will stick around a little bit longer. And I will tell you another secret. Because this is sticky, what you can do is when you're rolling cones out of your incense dough that you've made, you sort of pull off a piece and you're rolling it between your hands. You're going to make a stick out of this. Because it's sticky, you can actually roll this in other incense materials. So you can roll it in your original incense blend. This batch I rolled around in my mortar and pestle where I ground up my dragon's blood. So each of the cones is now rolled in dragon's blood resin. So it will also smell, ooh, it smells like cardamom right now.
Mm.
For those of you who have not experienced the joy of cardamom, my sister is a pastry chef in France, and they call it French cinnamon. So
I
it's,
love cardamom.
oh my God, it's so beautiful. So the water that I mentioned adding to actually make it sticky and pliable to work with it. Water is my all-purpose liquid that I'm speaking of, but it doesn't have to be water. You could use beer, you could use herbal teas that were blended for magical purposes. You could you could add honey, you could use red wine, you could use a lot of really beautiful materials. For instance, my very first batch of kefi that I made myself was highly amusing because I thought, oh, I'll just add a sprinkle, instead of using my measuring materials and my measuring tools like I'm supposed to. And a clump of cinnamon fell into my dough. So from then on, this batch of kefi that I kept, when I burn it, it smells like pancakes. So it's kept for very special materials, special occasions. So yeah, just grab your dough, roll it between your hands, roll it on your work surface, and keep it about the diameter of a pencil or thinner. Nothing thicker than a pencil. If it's too thick, it just won't burn. It's big enough it smothers the fire itself. So you can have just a little snaky dough piece. Press the bottom to give it a little base to stand up, and you have a very attractive incense cone. And it'll take 24 hours or so to dry out. And this wet, it was 260 grams of incense. So this is actually, I could probably make 100 pieces of incense out of this. So whether you practice with a group, whether you practice by yourself, this could be a beautiful gift for Yule. You could make this as a magical working group. Everybody mix their own and trade incense with each other. It's a beautiful work activity. I'm actually, when we're allowed to go out again, my dear friend down the street has 3 small people at home who are obsessed with incense. Children of witches, what can I tell you? So we're going to make incense ourselves. We're going to take it over there. They love all the smells. So I'm going to take some of this. We're going to take some of the mako powder. For $20, I got half a pound of this, and I can make a lot of incense with that. So it's a very empowering craft project, and it's something that you can do right now when you're inside your home. You can get somebody to ship you some materials and play with it, please. The thing about writing these books, the thing about writing in general, is that I don't do it because people say, oh, I love your books. That's a super nifty, awesome, I love it perk. But what I want is I want to empower people to paint with scent. The emotions and the experiences that we have just smelling a new thing is so empowering. Like that's what I want. That's what I get out of doing this materials, doing this stuff is the light bulb that comes on in your face when you connect something I'm talking about to a prior experience you had. That is why I do this. So if you can get together with friends or your family members and make your own incense, you can now have a happy memory to associate with a specific fragrance. So, and the idea of those connections, you might just see that in another book. Do you have another question?
We have a follow-up question
Ooh.
to the specific targeting of ex-lovers. They say, I know this is taboo, but can you burn something specifically to target their manhood?
Yes, that is something that can happen. Yes. Yes. Yeah. That sounds like a very specific question, so please feel free to contact me. Amy Blackthorn, author on Facebook, Blackthorn Hoodoo Blends on Facebook. I can help you out.
Perfect. Any other questions before we move on?
Yes, the recipe proportions.
Oh.
So I started with, I try and get around 35 grams of our plant material or incense materials for a standard size batch. If I'm using 35 grams of our resins, herbs, woods, trees, what have you, I would then have 30 grams of mako powder, MAKKO. Give it a good stir. Once that is stirred, then I'd add half of the water, so another 30 grams of water. Give that a nice rough stir. It'll start to be clumpy. It'll look like dough that isn't quite wet enough. I just give that a nice rough stir because it cuts down on the overall kneading time. Once it's roughly stirred, I'll add the other half in. So we have 35 grams of plant material. We have 30 grams of mako powder, would be 65 grams of material. So I'd add 65 grams of water by weight into my material and stir, stir and stir and stir. And then start kneading the dough with your hands. You'll just start by pinching and clumping. And you'll see really quick how sticky it gets. Sticky isn't even a sticky enough word for how sticky this gets. But sort of keep mashing it. I made it in this little, fake Rubbermaid container. And so I made sure to clump and make sure everything was in this ball. And the secret that I really love is you can let this sit with the lid on for 24 hours to let it really mature that scent and that fragrance. So the dough really does smell like cardamom, and it's sweeter than it was yesterday. Yesterday, it just sort of smelled like dry sawdust. But by sitting and maturing for 24 hours before I utilized it, fantastic. So when I'm on a incense bender, I'll make a batch today, and then tomorrow I'll roll it, and then before I roll out the incense, I'll make another batch so that I always have a batch that's waiting. So again, it's a fun craft. Don't make it too thick or it won't burn. If you make a batch that it's too thick and you don't want it to burn, you can actually mash it up, grind up the dry stick, and burn it over charcoal, or you can just keep it in a loose pile and light the ground in a loose pile so it has enough air to burn. Remember our fire triangles from 5th grade? You have to have your fuel, you have to have your oxygen, and you have to have your heat. If you don't have enough oxygen, it won't burn. So even these little thick nails that we've got going here, the base will be left behind because it's too wide. It has to have something to sit on, and I burn those over charcoal. So the recipe with the second ingredient is juniper. So our lunar intuitive capability incense. 2 parts juniper. I use the berries for this. The wood is very nice, but the juniper berries have a more rich scent to them. 2 parts myrrh. 1 part rose petal. 1 part sandalwood. 1 part mugwort. 1 part moonflower. And half a part of marigold. Yes, they do need to be dried before blending. If it's not dry, the whole incense will mold, and that will not be good. You'll have to compost it and start over. Before we run away, I wanted to read you a preview for the new book Blackthorn's Botanical Brews, which comes out in October. But keep adding questions if you have them in the chat room, and I'll get to them soon. People have been fascinated with the idea of bubbling cauldrons full of magical brews since time immemorial. When someone says witch, we conjure up images of women, crones, mothers, maidens, standing over bubbling vats of mysterious liquids, said to contain the power of the elements and life itself. However, most books won't touch the subject of potions for fear of allergies, lawsuits, and unintentional poisonings. This book was written to address the subject head-on by teaching you, dear reader, not only what potions are, but what purposes they serve and how to create these brews. What's a potion? Simply, a drink reputed to have magical powers and maybe medicinal, and sometimes they're poisonous. After all, what is the difference between medicine and poison? Dosage. Lost my place. What are some culturally acceptable toxins? Beer, wine, and other alcoholic beverages, cigars and cigarettes. One drink has a euphoric effect, and more drinks have a depressive state. Too many drinks and you risk alcohol poisoning. Then there's the magical effect. Each beverage is designed to encourage a different state. Love potions contain aphrodisiac herbs, and healing tonics contain soothing plants. The magic comes from not only knowing how to prepare each item, but also through imbuing our own love and energy inside to make it magical. Mom's chicken noodle soup isn't the same when we make it. We like to think that the missing ingredient is the loving feelings that Mom would put into it. To take a drink, we make a potion. We just need that extra step. Are you for real? I know the idea of magic can sound odd if you haven't worked with it yet. It sounds like something from a sci-fi novel. Fun fact, lots of writers in witchcraft nonfiction also write science fiction and fantasy novels. It's true, look it up. It's a common belief that since energy can neither be created nor destroyed, that spells are inherently changing the form of that energy. For instance, if I need money, I might burn a green candle. The energy I raise, we'll discuss that in a moment, along with the flame of the candle provides fuel to create the change of circumstance. We're changing the energy of the candle into the power of prosperity. Do you need a candle? No. It's helpful, though, especially if you're first starting. It gives you something to focus on, a mental touchstone to remind yourself that you're actually working on something. When I talk about sacred smoke, and I get a lot of people asking, why is it that you have a section on stones in a book about smoke? But the neat thing is, when you carry a stone that you have utilized in ritual practice, when you've really worked with it, imbued with your own intuition, your own ability, your own magic, every time you reach into your pocket, you brush your hand up against that stone, or you walk past it in the kitchen, you're reminded of the magic that the spell that you cast, the intention that you performed right away. Oh yeah, I did that. You have a small adventure you did for a money spell. You have a pretty little rose quartz you had standing by for a love spell. Each time you feel that stone in your pocket, oh yeah, I'm drawing love to me. I want an incredible loving relationship with the right person, and everything will be great. So every time you brush up against that stone, you encounter the memory of the scent that you created. You inform on that practice. You're creating those lines back and forth between you and your intended outcome. You're giving the universe a path to follow. Sort of the same way that rivers carve through land. The Grand Canyon was once a trickling stream. Okay, water is what wears down through that smooth stone. So keep that idea in your head when you're working with stones. You can incorporate multiple modalities of magic at the same time and still have an incredible result. That recipe is not in Sacred Smoke, but there's a very similar recipe in Sacred Smoke. So yes and no.
But Amy, earlier, like in the main part of your talk, before you read from the forthcoming book, all those recipes were in Sacred Smoke, right?
They're very close recipes, but not the exact recipes.
Okay.
And if there's a question after this, just shoot me a message and I'll, absolutely, if you missed an ingredient or you had a question, I'm always available. If you think of a question a week from now, a year from now, I'm here. I'm here for you. This is why I do what I do. So absolutely hit me up and say, oh, hey, you remember that incense thing? I might not remember exactly when we were talking about it, but I keep all my notes for all my materials on my classes. So I can absolutely say, oh yeah, that recipe, it was this and this and this. The access isn't something that I was used to as a very baby witch, you know, almost 30 years ago. The idea of meeting somebody that I had admired professionally was just out of my realm of possibility. So I try and be as accessible as a person as I absolutely can be. Does anyone have any more questions? Because I can keep going. Let's see. So we talked about the oil burner method. On the other hand, if your situation is that you're allergic to certain fragrances, a lot of them are commercially available incense brands contain synthetics. Trial and error is the best that we can hope for in a lot of those cases. The best solution could be to avoid traditional incenses at all and make your own. So you know that only the things that you're not allergic to are available for your incense practice. So how to read those recipes. Any good cook knows that the first step is always grab your ingredients together. So because it's very easy to, when you're running around and doing it on the fly, that you get halfway through your recipe and realize you're out of eggs. That's bad. We don't want that. It's happened to me. I'm guilty of that. So by making sure you have all your materials on hand and they're readily accessible right away means you don't have that problem. So collect your ingredients, your mixing spoons, your jars, lids, labels. Please, I'll give you $1 and a hug. Label everything. Even if you think, oh, I've already label it 2 times. Can't hurt. We were discussing, a dear friend of mine had lost someone very close to them. He and his wife went to clean out her home. This beautiful young soul was in college and died of the flu. Just the regular flu. So they were trying to clean out her magical cabinets and her supplies that her family had no idea what to do with. And there were several materials and several potions that had no labels on them. So they had to throw them away because it could be something caustic, it could be something that's toxic, something that's poisonous. Absolutely make sure that you label and label and label. Even the special white labels, occasionally they'll yellow in the sun when they're exposed to light and they'll start to peel off. Please label everything. I will absolutely label these bad mamma jammas when they are dry. I've got great big IKEA jars for them. So I have 2x4 actually big labels, so they'll go on the jar and every ingredient in the incense will go on there. So each recipe that we're talking about is listed in parts. There's a couple reasons for that. You can be scaled up, it can be scaled down. If you're making enough incense for just you just need a little bit. So your part could be a teaspoon. But if you're trying to make a pound of it for a large ritual or you have a larger business, your parts could be pounds. So we're actually making sure that it's a scalable model and you're able to take those measurements and make them what you need them to be. So these recipes I'm going to give you for the next 5 minutes. They're not in the book. I will go slowly. If you're a person who's on camera, just wave if I start to go too fast. Winter Wonderland is a really beautiful Yule blend. It's very wintry scented. I start with pine shavings. This is what was it? It was an Anna Riva blend. They used to come in plastic containers, and some said pine, some said frankincense, some said myrrh. I used 7 parts of that. So you could say 7 teaspoons. but we're going to go with parts. 1 part frankincense tears. Remember, a tear is a drop. They look like little drop shapes because the frankincense, the trees that produce resin are done so by scoring the bark, and they start to bleed resin. They start to bleed this sap that dries out to become resin. So it actually forms tears because it's a drop that's drying. So 1 part frankincense tears, 1 part clove. I recommend using ground clove rather than whole cloves, but they both work. This one's called Winter Solstice. 6 parts cedar wood, not the cedar leaves. It has a different scent to it, really. It's a little drier smelling. What herbs or incense would you use for reducing arguing in a relationship that's going through a rough patch? Chamomile. I would add chamomile to an incense. I would diffuse chamomile essential oil, all the chamomile. There's some discussion in the aromatherapy communities whether German or Roman chamomile, they're both good for this work. There's other specific things that they can be utilized for, but in recipes like this, I would absolutely chamomile. It's a cooling herb, so it brings down the responses in the body, cools tempers, it cools the body itself. It's good for bringing down fevers. There's a recipe in Blackthorn's Botanical Magic. I think it's in the emotional well-being. Anger into action. No. Comfort food is good. Where is it? Fried Friend Fixer is a chamomile-based oil. You can actually diffuse that, or you can make it into a magical oil. Just diffuse it or dilute it into a carrier oil and draw on your candles. You can draw a petition and anoint it with chamomile oil. Chamomile. Yuletide cheer. 6 parts cedar wood, 2 parts frankincense. It's a lot easier on yourself mixing these if you grind them into powder as you need them for each recipe. So I would grind the cedar wood and then I'd grind the frankincense powder. 1 part myrrh powder. And then this one, you can actually put 1 part charcoal, so it's a combustible incense. So you don't need to burn over charcoal because it already contains charcoal. It's still loose, so just stack it up in a little pile and light the top of the pile. You can omit the charcoal. It'll have a longer curing time, which means it'll take longer to dry. Just like when you're making soap, some people add salt to it so it cures faster. Deities. We have a couple minutes. Hecate is one of the ones I get very commonly asked. This recipe is Scott Cunningham's. It's from Incenses, Oils, and Brews. He has a recipe for Hecate incense. 3 parts sandalwood, 2 parts cypress. It's one of the plants that is most commonly associated with Hecate, and 1 part peppermint. Peppermint's a really funny one because the camphor smell, the mentholated action of scenting and smelling peppermint is cooling, but when it's burning, it's hot. So there's this weird thing that happens with your nose where you're not really sure what you're smelling. It's not a bad thing, but it's odd if you're not expecting it. The rest of the winter solstice. 6 parts cedarwood, 2 parts frankincense powder, 1 part myrrh powder, and 1 part charcoal powder. That's optional. So again, that you could just sprinkle right on burning charcoal and it'll do everything by itself. The thing about charcoal is that you have to babysit it. If you don't have the energy or the wherewithal to babysit your burning charcoal, The other thing that I would recommend, and a lot of our shops carry it because they're incredible. It's a company called Fred Soul. Fred Soul is a beautiful little old man. It lives in the desert. Creates these sticks. He just takes the bamboo and he dips it in molten resin and hangs it to dry. Dip, dry, dip, dry, dip, dry. So you light the end of the stick and it's burning resin, but you don't have to babysit it with, like you would charcoal. And it burns, because it's a resin, it burns for 2 or 3 hours sometimes, depending on how thick the stick is. But Fred Soul is the originator of the resin on a stick. He has a beautiful frankincense. He has a few amber pieces. Their dragon's blood is incredible. So a lot of the shops that are participating in our event today carry Fred Soul. Really fantastic. I absolutely love anything that is produced by this company. So if you don't have the ability to babysit some charcoal for a little bit, try the Fred Soul. It's expensive. I will tell you, it's probably, I've been buying it for 20 years and it's probably $1 a stick, but it's worth it because it's resin. There's no mako powder. There's no other materials to dilute your experience. But it is a little bit more expensive. So highly recommend the Fred Soul resin on the stick. SOL. It might be 2 L's. But soul like the sun, not something else. Oh yes, SOL. Yeah. Thank you, Sandy. 2 L's. Sandy says 2 L's. Really fabulous company. Can't say enough good stuff about them. So it is 8:30. We're going to wrap up. Again, I wanted to say thank you so much to the partners that have brought me into their homes this evening. Arts and Craft in Michigan, Pathways in Missouri, Soul Journey, thank you, Sandy, in New Jersey, Finding Avalon in Delaware, and New Moon Books in Florida. And if you enjoyed this, maybe you'll talk to your shop owners and might have me out for an event. Before we wrap up, I just wanted to remind you, since you made the journey to come and visit me today, I put out a discount code for blackthornhoodooblends.com. You can get 20% off anything on the website, so you can find yourself some fabulous tea. Make sure if you don't have the books already, you can find them at your local shop. And that coupon code is SMOKE, all lowercase, and just enter that at checkout. It'll give you 20% off your entire purchase. So if you've wanted to take one of my classes online, all of my classes, just like this on Zoom, I've recorded, and they're available for your purchase. You can take them live through classes like this. If your shop wants to set up an independent class for you, you can do that as well. So again, coupon code is SMOKE, and you'll get 20% off for the entire month of May. So if you don't get paid, if you're waiting for unemployment, whatever it is, you've got an entire month. Check it out. I have sample codes, sample boxes that you can make up yourself. I want to try 12 different flavors of tea. You can. I'm up to 72 flavors of tea right now. They're separated by intent. There's magical. Hey, thank you. There's magical teas. There's traditional hoodoo blends that I create. I used to make the oils 20 years ago, and these are teas that are formulated directly from those recipes. This isn't a gimmick. This is my practice, and it is very solemn and special to me. There are new lines that are being filled out right now. There's a tarot line. There's a new line of botanicals. So this line will have matching teas and spell candles. Very excited. So the first one is Ancestor Support, and it is up right now. There's just a lot of me in these materials. You can also check out amyblackthorn.com and all the information on my books, where to find them, and what's coming down the line will be there. So I thank you so much for your attention today. And again, Sam reminded me. Thank you, Sam. I have a podcast you can also check out. Most recent episode of the Blackthorn Grove podcast. was a 40-minute class on breathing exercises to help with anxiety. You know, there's a lot of fear, stress, and anxiety that's happening. So there's a free, almost an hour class that's available on Blackthorn Grove podcast. You can give it a like and be notified anytime there's a new episode out. There's probably, I just recorded the 5th episode, so there's a couple episodes for you to check out. There's an interview with Mortellus, who is a Llewellyn author who's actually talking about death and dying, and really incredible work there. I'm looking forward to the release. It's called Do I Have to Wear Black? It's adorable and I love it, and I'm going to be giving these out like Oprah gives away cars because it's a good book. So thank you for your time and attention, and I'm available if you have questions after this. Just shoot me a message. If you had questions about any of the recipes, you think you might have missed something, hit me up. It's fine. Thank you very much. I appreciate everyone's time and attention today, and thank you again to the stores that are sponsoring this. Have a great day.